Doctors and nurses digging through my head, stitching through psyche like a needle through thread, picking through all the places in my mind, searching for something that they'll never find, looking for feelings and workings and cures. They think they can help me, but they can't, I'm sure. They think ink blots and head shocks will break down my chains, but these only bring physical additional pain. I can't understand what they hope to achieve. My confessions and stories that they wouldn't believe. And if they won't listen to that, what shall I do? The voices in my head provide no help too, and most of the time they place me in my cell, my own personal, padded and very small hell. Again, this is something they think will help me. But I don't want to be here. I want to be free. Surely they know this. Surely they care. But it seems their concern vanished into thin air. It seems that they want to wash their hands of me. For what value to anyone is insanity? For a brief period in 1971, a New Jersey-based company sold novelty X-ray glasses through the mail via advertisements in the Marvel line of comic books. People who viewed their televisions while wearing these glasses reported seeing images that were hellish or like hell. It should be noted that this phenomenon occurred whether the televisions in question were turned on or not. The company quickly went out of business, and investigations revealed the company's address leads to an old graveyard that had been abandoned decades before. Jesus, I cried, being jolted from a half doze at 1:15 by my new Halloween-themed ringtone. It didn't do wonders for my heart rate, especially since I momentarily forgot I changed the tone at all that day. Took me a while to find my phone stuck down the side of the armchair I was sitting in, not helped by the fact that the only light in the sitting room was the static on the widescreen TV. Unknown number. I answered it. There was no one there. To be honest, I was expecting heavy breathing on the other end, as I was still a little freaked out, but there was no noise at all. I hung up, took a deep breath, and frowned. Maybe I just pocket-dialed myself. My old iPhone could make a fake self-call, designed to create a diversion, so if as I was having a boring conversation with someone, I could pretend Mom was ringing or something, although I wasn't familiar at all with this new piece of crap. My dad bought it from a gas station for $20 a few days ago, as I'd lost my iPhone on a trip to the city last week. I flicked through the features on the menu screen, trying to find the fake call option, but didn't have much luck. For one thing, the screen was about half the size of a credit card. I cursed and decided to watch TV instead to take my mind off things. I tried using the light of my cell phone to find the remote, with little success. Groaning out of laziness, I hauled myself out of the chair to get to the light switch. Stopping halfway, I registered the fact that I had the TV on the satellite channels when I fell asleep, yet now it was static from the analog aerial. I ran the rest of the way to switch and basically punched it. Light flooded the room, and my darting eyes saw nothing. After another deep breath, my moment of fear passed. Guess I was having a little unused to have the whole house to myself. Mom and Dad were gone for the night, but it was quite a treat, since they rarely went anywhere, even during the day. Nowhere to go but fields around this part of the country. So them going to a friend's wedding meant I finally had some solitude. I still couldn't see the remote, so I decided to recheck the sides of the armchair. I threw my phone on the seat and reached deep down either side. The phone rang again at full creepy blast, with my ear pressed right up against it. I angrily grabbed it. Damn it, what? Again, there was dead silence. Cursing, I threw the phone back on the seat hard. At that moment, the light bulb blew out violently and the power went out, thrusting me into total darkness. With a shriek, I scrambled to grab the phone again and found it after an instant of blind terror. Using the tiny screen light to see, I panicked and bolted down to my room as fast as I could. Jumped into bed and pulled the covers. I curled into a fetal position. I was panting hard from both the run and fear. I couldn't form any thought for about 5 breaths until I decided to call my dad. Looking at the screen, I saw I forgot to hang up the last call. My breath caught in my throat as I saw that this time it wasn't an unknown number. It was mine, from the old number from the phone I'd lost. As I hit the red button, my terrified mind began to race through 1,000 horrible implications until I realized something else. My bed was already warm. Beep beep. The message tone nearly gave me a heart attack. It's under your pillow. Ever so slowly, my trembling hand slid underneath the pillow and found the TV remote. From under the covers, I heard my bedroom door close, then lock. If you are ever in an area of absolute quiet, still your breathing and move not a muscle. After a few seconds, you will notice that the silence has sort of a sound of its own, a kind of empty ringing tone. There is nothing unique. Everyone will hear this, given the proper setting. An informed person will tell you that your brain is trying to interpret the lack of stimuli to your hearing, so it creates a bit of a filler sound. This ringing sound actually serves a more arcane purpose, covering up a noise we are not meant to hear. This noise is not impossible to hear, and if you are persistent, you can effectively break the cover-up sound. The next time you are silent and hear the ringing, shout at the top of your lungs for about half a minute, then be abruptly silent. It will be different for everyone. Some will hear nothing, different for dozens of tries. Others might pick up a soft murmuring. A special few auditory heroes might clearly make it out on the first attempt. What you will hear is a voice that relays an account of events about to happen in the immediate future. It's like a sportscaster relaying the scenes and events occurring 10 seconds into the future. As time goes on, you will be able to make out this voice under increasingly noisy circumstances, to the point it could be heard at any time just by concentrating. Such ability would doubtless be invaluable, no? You will be able to react to any immediate danger, relate to people around you with greater ease. No one would ever surprise you. Now, of course, you're wondering what sort of horrible catch this ability entails. Perhaps the tone of the voice is so horrible that it will drive you mad. Or maybe the voice will only predict your death over and over again. Of course, this isn't the case, though. It's a normal voice. Your ears receive it no matter what, and it's simply a matter of noticing. But there is a danger, for you see, where there is a voice, there is a body. And just like you will notice new sounds, so shall you notice new sights. More importantly, you will be noticed. I was babysitting my niece once while I was staying at my brother's place, and they had a baby camera set up so I could see her on the little TV it came with. I was studying and started dozing off when I heard some whispering and realized it was coming from the baby monitor. I initially thought it was some feedback or something, but when I looked at the TV, there was a dark shadow near my niece's crib. I had never been more terrified in my life, but the shadow was clearly there where it had not been before. I ran to my niece's room and looked around and saw nothing, but I took her the hell out of there. I went back to the TV and the shadow was clearly gone. I told my brother what happened and he pulled me aside and told me not to mention it to my sister-in-law because she'll freak out, but that he had seen that same thing several times now with the same whispering. They stayed in that house for about 4 more years, and when my niece was just learning how to talk, she would tell her mom about her special friend. To this day, it scares the hell out of me. When they moved out, my brother told me my niece had become inconsolably sad because she would miss her friend. Her mom would tell her she could bring him along, but all she would say was that he couldn't leave the house. We have never to this day told her about the damn shadow, and she apparently never saw it. A group of teenagers went on a trip to the seaside. They found a cliff that overlooked the water and sat down to have a picnic. Afterwards, some of the teenagers decided to go for a swim. They took turns diving from the cliff into the water. One girl had brought her camera with her and she began taking pictures of her friends as they jumped. One of the boys jumped off the cliff and landed in the sea with an enormous splash. His friends clapped and cheered, but when they peered over the cliff, they couldn't see him. The boy never surfaced, and his tearful friends had to call the police. A team of rescue workers eventually dragged the boy's body out of the sea. He had drowned. A week later, after attending the funeral, the dead boy's friends were looking through the photos they had taken that day. When they came to one picture in particular, they stopped and stared in horror. It was a photo of the drowned boy, taken just as he was jumping off the cliff. Clearly visible in the photograph coming out of the water were countless pale white hands clutching the boy tightly and dragging him into the sea. It happened 30 years ago. On a late Halloween afternoon, a school bus was on its usual route, but this wasn't your typical school bus, and they weren't your typical kids. There were 8 of them, and they were different, troubled, disturbed. Every day the parents put their dirty little secrets on this bus, and they were driven to a special school, miles outside of town. But that day, the driver took a different route, and instead of taking the students home, he drove the bus to an abandoned rock quarry. What the kids didn't know was that over the years, their parents had become exhausted and embarrassed, and they were willing to do anything to ease their burden. So one day, the parents approached the bus driver and made him an offer. With the money they collected together, they asked him to do the unthinkable. It almost worked perfectly. The driver was never heard from again. As for the bus, some say it sank so deep that it couldn't be found. Others say the town just didn't want it to be found. For all we know, it is still down there, and so are the kids. Jake's mother promised him that if he sat quietly in the waiting room while she saw her new doctor, he could have 3 bowls of ice cream afterwards. Despite this promise, Jake was not happy. He didn't like waiting, and he didn't like the room. He especially didn't like the painting that was hanging on the opposite wall of him. It was an ugly portrait of an old man. Jake didn't like the way the old man in the painting seemed to be staring right at him. There was a strange and awful look in his eyes. It was so disturbing that it sent a chill down his spine. Jake tried moving, but the old man's eyes seemed to follow him around the room. It was a creepy picture, but Jake didn't want to admit to himself that he was scared of it. He went closer to the painting, and that's when he suddenly noticed something that struck him as odd. The old man's hands were gnarled and twisted with long bony fingers and pointed nails. When his mother finally came out of the doctor's office, Jake was nowhere to be found. She caught a glimpse of an old man slipping out the door. She called her son's name, but he didn't answer. The waiting room was empty. Then she turned around and noticed the portrait hanging on the wall. The young boy in the picture looked oddly familiar, and her screams could be heard all the way down the street. When I was 7, I woke up in the middle of the night with an earache. I decided to tell my mom and stepdad and walked out of my room. Someone was sitting on the chair in the living room, which was about 3 feet away from my bedroom door. The person looked strange. The face was just kind of distorted, but it was dark and I couldn't see well. "Mom?" I asked. The person shook their head, and I started getting scared. "Mike?" The person shook their head again. I decided the best course of option was to go back to bed so I wouldn't have to walk past this person. I climbed in bed and closed my eyes for a second before opening them and seeing the person standing in my doorway, smiling madly and nodding furiously. One afternoon, a couple was traveling on by car when at a far distance they saw a woman in the middle of the road waving frantically. The wife told her husband to keep on driving because it might be too dangerous, but the husband decided to pass by slowly so he wouldn't stay with the doubt on his mind of what might have happened and the chances of anyone being hurt. As they got closer, they noticed a woman with cuts and bruises on her face as well on her arms. They then decided to stop and see if they could be of any help. The cut and bruised woman was begging for help, telling them that she'd been in a car accident and that her husband and son, a newborn baby, were still inside the car, which was in a deep ditch. She told them that the husband was already dead, but that her baby seemed to be alive. The husband that was traveling decided to get down and try to rescue the baby, and he asked the hurt woman to stay with his wife inside their car. When he got down, he noticed 2 people in the front seats of the car, but he didn't pay any attention to it and took out the baby quickly and got up to take the baby to its mother. When he got up, he didn't see the mother anywhere, so he asked his wife where she had gone. She told him the woman followed him back to the crashed car. When the husband went back to look for her, he noticed that clearly the couple in the front seats were dead, one of whom was unmistakably the woman who had flagged them down. A strange ringtone plays on your cell phone. You reach for it, but whoever it was must have hung up. A wrong number, maybe? You look at the phone anyway. You've missed a call. You listen to it. When you put your phone to your ear, suddenly you hear a scream of pain. You toss the cell across the room, but you can still hear it. When you finally pick up the phone, you see who the call was from. You realize whose voice it was. Yours. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.